If you are looking to buy your first Bitcoin ETF, trying to figure out which one you want to purchase into, or trying to buy some of the Bitcoin ETF before the halving here in a couple weeks, these are the two I think you should look at. It's going to be BlackRock's IBitcoin ETF and Fidelity's FBitcoin ETF. Now, these are two of the biggest ETFs in the Bitcoin space. They have a little bit of differences, but I want to talk about why you would want to invest into one of these two versus some of the other Bitcoin ETFs out there, and then what these two differentiate from each other. So Fidelity and BlackRock have a lot of differences between them: fees, how they hold their Bitcoin, and who they are as an asset manager. So all these things need to be taken into account if you're going to invest into something like the new Bitcoin ETFs. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF is going to have a couple key advantages. First off, they're one of the largest asset managers. They're actually the largest asset manager on earth. 3.1 trillion assets under management, something along those lines. But they are the largest and known to be the largest asset manager out there today. So when you buy into something like their Bitcoin ETF, you get that brand recognition of working with the largest asset manager. You know that they do have a reputation to uphold. They do have, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, has been out in the media as a Bitcoin bull and possibly even an Ethereum bull. And he's looking at the tokenization of the crypto markets and tokenization of all assets everywhere. So he thinks that tokenization is a big deal, and you get that name recognition and that BlackRock reputation when you buy into something like their Bitcoin, iShares Bitcoin ETF. What you also get when you invest in the BlackRock's ETF over a lot of the other ETFs is you get the holdings that they have. So currently, Grayscale is the largest Bitcoin ETF, but I think we all know that with their high fees and them having the G Bitcoin conversion thing, their ETF's going to start dwindling down slightly. Currently, BlackRock has the highest volume Bitcoin ETF out there on a daily basis. They're buying the most Bitcoin and they're having the most inflow. So they're the second largest Bitcoin ETF. And with that, you get an asset manager that's holding over 250,000 Bitcoin. They're actually holding $17 billion in Bitcoin in their ETF. And when you invest into something like that, you have a large institution backing it and you have the largest brand name. I would highly expect the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF to keep growing at a pace much larger than the other Bitcoin ETFs. And I would not be surprised to see it pass Grayscale eventually in a year or 2 years or in a couple years as the largest Bitcoin ETF. This would not surprise me. I expect the BlackRock ETF, the iBitcoin ETF, to keep growing at a tremendous pace. Cons of the BlackRock iBitcoin ETF is that it has a 0.25% fee. It was feeless up until the first 5 billion assets under management. That has been passed, so it has a 0.25% fee, and BlackRock is custodying all their Bitcoin on Coinbase. So there are vulnerabilities with having all your money on an exchange like Coinbase. I think a lot of people in crypto know that, and the hardware wallet companies know that, and hacks do happen. I think a lot of people respect Coinbase and think Coinbase is a good exchange and has security measures, but it is always risky to keep $17 billion in Bitcoin in the custody of something like Coinbase. All right, so BlackRock has those two negatives. Fidelity, on the other hand, is going to self-custody all of its Bitcoin. Some people see this as a good thing. Some people see it as a bad thing. Fidelity really has to manage their cold and hot wallet storage solutions and their transfers of money so they're not losing Bitcoin. But Fidelity is taking that into their own hands to self-custody, which I personally prefer. They're also known to be a long-term investor and a long-term partner in the crypto space. So Fidelity was mining Bitcoin. They've been around crypto for many, many years, probably the longest of any other asset manager, and they do have a reputation as a positive force in the crypto space. Fidelity is also going to be the third largest Bitcoin ETF, right behind BlackRock, which is also behind Grayscale. Fidelity is growing and doing probably about the same amount of volume that Grayscale is doing. BlackRock's doing about double of Fidelity and Grayscale's volume. So if Fidelity and Grayscale are doing about 500, 600 million, maybe upper 400 millions, BlackRock's doing like 1.2 billion. So Fidelity is sort of matching the volume of the Grayscale Bitcoin ETF. And I do think if BlackRock were to overtake Grayscale, Fidelity would soon follow in becoming the second largest Bitcoin ETF. Much like BlackRock, Fidelity also is one of the largest names in crypto. And I think of BlackRock kind of like that large dark horse of the ETF investment space, I think of Fidelity much more like a Vanguard, like a retail brand name that is really trusted by consumers. And where Vanguard is not investing into Bitcoin and offering Bitcoin products, Fidelity is really taking that cake. I think other ETFs like ARK and BitShares or the other smaller ones don't really have that name recognition that something like Fidelity and Vanguard do. And since Vanguard has taken themselves out of the Bitcoin race, I think Fidelity is really shining with the large scale of retail investors trying to get into the Bitcoin ETF. It is becoming their go-to method, and that's why I personally went with the Fidelity Bitcoin ETF. Fidelity currently holds 145,000 Bitcoin in their Bitcoin ETF in their holdings, which is worth around $9 billion. And currently, you can buy Fidelity's FBitcoin ETF with zero fees up until July 31st of this year, 2024. So it does have a little bit better things going on with the fees currently. BlackRock is a little bit bigger. Fidelity is right behind it at the third largest. But Fidelity, you can currently get no fees on your Bitcoin up until July 31st. So if you're going to buy before the halving, you might want to consider Fidelity for that reason. What I would say about both the BlackRock and the Fidelity Bitcoin ETFs is that they are absolutely dominating the space. Bitcoin is up like 70% this year or something, and up like 150 to 200% over the last year to date. It is absolutely dominating, and because of that, we're seeing the ETFs up almost 100% this year alone, since they've been out since January. So I do think that both BlackRock and Fidelity's ETFs will outpace Grayscale, and I think a lot of people are leaving Grayscale's Bitcoin ETF because they have a 1.5% fee. It's 5 times the fee of Grayscale, or Grayscale's fee is 5 times the fee of Fidelity and BlackRock's fee. So that can have an impact of like 50% of your gains over the 20 years that you're going to hold the Bitcoin ETF. So that's a big chunk of change. All that could be turned into capital gains, and instead you'll pay it in fees. I want to make this a shorter video, so the last thing I'd say is you really can't go wrong with BlackRock or Fidelity's Bitcoin ETF. I think you would mostly choose to use one or the other based on how they hold their Bitcoin. So BlackRock holds their Bitcoin on Coinbase, where Fidelity self-custodies their own Bitcoin in a combination of hardware and hot wallets. BlackRock, you get that largest asset manager controlling your Bitcoin, which is always, a good thing to have the largest brand in finance. Fidelity, I feel like it's a more retail-friendly brand, more of like a Vanguard and a Fidelity, but Vanguard's not doing Bitcoin, so Fidelity is taking the cake there. Fidelity also has no fees up until July 31st, so for me, that's a big deal. I like the combination of having no fees and then only having a 0.25% fee, and Fidelity self-custodying their own Bitcoin, which I really appreciate being someone who's in the crypto space. A lot of retail holders who are coming from stocks or bonds or Forex might not care about the self-custody, so they might go with BlackRock. But me being somebody who's been in crypto for a couple years, I appreciate the self-custody aspect of it, so I chose to go with Fidelity for that reason and for the fee-less transactions reason as well. So both of these products are good. Depending on what you think is important, you might want to go with BlackRock or Fidelity. But I definitely think out of all the Bitcoin ETFs, these are the two you should be looking at. Grayscale has too high of a fee. All the other ones don't have the brand recognition and the name recognition and the size of the ETF that BlackRock and Fidelity do. And size and brand recognition do have a play. When you're buying into stuff like ETFs, not only do you have to worry about the underlying asset, so like Bitcoin itself, but then you also have to worry about the name recognition and the brand recognition of the ETF that you're packaged in. So while the BlackRock and the Fidelity Bitcoin ETFs are tied to Bitcoin, their price is tied to Bitcoin, if something bad happened in the news with Fidelity, you could expect a sell-off in the Fidelity Bitcoin ETF, whereas BlackRock would not sell off, it would probably go up. Similar with an ARK ETF. If you were invested into an ARK ETF instead of a Fidelity ETF or a BlackRock ETF, and something happened with the ARK fund, that ETF stock can drop massively, whereas the underlying asset's not really influencing it. Something that the brand does can influence the price. So that's always something to look at and to think about when you're investing into ETFs, is you need to combine both the underlying asset and the name recognition of the brand. That can affect the underlying asset or the share price of that ETF stock. These are all really big things to consider. Think about them when you're buying your Bitcoin ETF. I'd highly recommend buying before the halving or around the halving, because in 6 months, Bitcoin's not going to be at 70K. It's going to be probably $80, $90, $100,000. So I'm loading up right now. I got about 50 or 60 shares of Bitcoin, a couple $1,000s invested, and I'm already up over 25% on my money, so I was buying a couple months ago. So if you want to see a video of when I purchased my Fidelity Bitcoin and my current profit levels, drop it in the comments. I'll make a video on it and show you how my assets have been doing. Other than that, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.